write in Comp 1 is a narrative essay. This is a really fun project, and hopefully it will just help you get your feet wet in this class and want to jump right in to finding your voice as a writer. So, in short, the narrative essay is just a story that you are going to tell. It's going to be a story about you. I suggest that you pick a story about a person or event that has really kind of shaped who you are. And there's some essential elements that you're going to see pop up in the narrative essay examples that we look at. I'm going to have you read 3 as well as watch a couple of videos that are great examples of narrative essays. And you're going to see these elements pop up in each of these. So the first one is an attention-getting opening. If you handed somebody an essay that says, everybody has a story or event that shaped who they are as a person, my story or event that shaped who I am as a person is ... they're probably not going to be captivated and, passionate about reading this work. They might think, oh, this doesn't sound like something that I want to read. So spend some time working on your introduction. In addition to that, really well-written narrative essays tell a good story. So you want to make sure that you have a well-told story. A lot of times these deal with a situation that needs to be resolved. And usually well-written narratives include clearly described details. These sort of sensory details are going to make your work come alive for your readers. Oftentimes they deal with how subject matter affects the identity, or they have this sort of ongoing discussion of the central idea. Usually they explain either kind of the roots or the cause and effect of why something is happening, and a lot of times the ending references back to the beginning. Usually by the end of a narrative essay, you can kind of understand why this particular story is important to this particular person. And a lot of times in narrative essays, the conclusion is tentative. Your story isn't over, so sometimes when you get to the conclusion, there's still a question of what's going to happen next. As you sit down to write your essay, I want you to give some thought to essay organization or structure. For this essay, you're going to have 3 main sections: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. And some of these sections may be longer than 1 paragraph. The body definitely will be. So you want to kind of think about what goes into each section. For your introduction, give me some background information. You also want to make sure that your introduction is interesting and captivating. The goal of your introduction is to make somebody want to read your paper. And then in your introduction, I also want you to introduce your central focus or your main idea. Go ahead and underline whatever sentence or 2 you think is your central focus or your main idea. And then in the body is where you are going to actually tell your story. So remember all of those narrative essay elements that we went over in the last slide. Make sure those are all worked in. This section will probably be at least 3 paragraphs, but maybe several more. And then the last section that you're going to work on is a conclusion. Your conclusion will re-examine sort of the central idea or focus of your essay. I want the end to sort of reference back to the beginning, and then also you have this question about whether or not the conclusion is tentative. Is this story over, or could there be more to come? So this is how you will sort of structure your essay. Okay, these next couple of slides are just kind of like a little handy-dandy guide to writing a narrative. So the first thing that you're going to do is kind of think about what you want to write about. And we're actually going to be pre-writing and brainstorming this in the next class. So kind of be mulling it over, but if you don't know exactly today, that's okay. And then once you kind of do know what you want to talk about, use some pre-writing techniques to formulate ideas and outlines. Now, if you have no idea what that means, that's totally okay, because we're going to talk about it in the next class. And then once you're like, okay, I definitely am going to write this, there's some steps that I want you to take before you actually get down to writing your essay. The first one is I want you to describe your setting. You don't have to start your essay this way, but I still want you to write it down and really put yourself in a good headspace. Think about where and when your story takes place. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you feel? What do you taste, right? Maybe your story takes place in a hospital. Well, that's going to look totally different if it takes place in a hospital because a loved one is sick or dying than if it takes place in the hospital because you're giving birth to your first child, or maybe, your mom is giving birth to your little brother, right? Those are very joyous occasions versus maybe something that's not so joyous. So don't just tell me it smells like a hospital. Tell me what it smells like to you, what it looks like, what it feels like. And then I want you to think about the key people in your story. Describe each major person in a paragraph or so, and just jot this down. And if it never makes it into your essay, that's completely fine. Think about what about this person makes them unique. What makes them so good or so bad or worthy to be in your story. Think about, conversations or dialogue that y'all have had. And then when you actually sit down to write the story, I am giving you permission to summarize. Focus on the important details and facts. You do not have to include every fact or every aspect of the event. If it isn't crucial to the plot of your story, or if it isn't interesting, you have permission to just leave it out. Then start writing your story and go from beginning to end. Now, when you actually submit your essay, if you rearrange the order that the events are placed in your essay, that's totally fine. You'll see in narrative essays like My Family's Slave that sometimes the story starts at the end, then it goes back to the beginning, then it goes back to the end. All of that is totally fine, but because our brains tend to work in chronological order, you'll remember everything more clearly if you just write it from beginning to end. Then the next thing I want you to do is come up with a title, an amazing title. A good title indicates something about your story and makes people want to read your work. Do not title your paper My Narrative Essay. That's the title of the assignment. It's not the title of this beautiful, creative work that you have just written. And then after your story is written, have people read it. Give them your essay and say, read this and tell me what you think. Now, my advice for this is have somebody who likes you, but not a whole lot, read your essay. Don't give it to your mom if she's going to be like, oh my gosh, baby, this is the best thing you've ever written. Don't give it to your boyfriend who's going to say like, wow, babe, this is great. You should be a professional writer. Give it to somebody who's going to be like, I liked it, but I had some questions. Somebody who will be honest with you and give you some really good feedback. And you can ask questions if they don't offer that feedback. Things like, do the title and the first few sentences make you want to keep reading? Is the order of events clear and easy to understand? Is there anything about my essay that is confusing? Is there enough detail in there to make it interesting? Can you sort of feel those sensory details coming to life? Are the visuals well integrated? And we're going to talk about visuals in just a moment. Is the narrative meaningful? Thank them for their time, and then take all of their advice and proofread your paper. We're actually going to do some peer editing for this. So you'll have one of your classmates look at it, but I strongly suggest you have somebody else look at it as well. Okay, each time we do an essay project, I'm going to give you what I call the nitty-gritty. This is just some basic details that you need to know for the essay project. The first thing is that this essay is going to be written in MLA format. MLA stands for the Modern Language Association. We're going to be talking about it over, the next couple of weeks, and so by the end you'll be really familiar with it. But essentially, this is just a structure that shows you like how to space your papers, what font to use, that kind of stuff. This is a 3+ page paper, which means you need at least 3 full pages of double-spaced text. In addition to that, I'm going to ask that you use visual aids for this assignment. They can't take up more than half of 1 page. And I'm also going to ask that you're the creator of the visual aid. That means you draw me a picture, you take a photograph, you use a photograph that you own. So for example, if your essay is about your relationship with your father, then put a picture of you and your father in there. Don't just find a stock image of a father and a child and insert it into your essay. Make it something that is meaningful to the work that you have created. Next class, in addition to brainstorming and pre-writing, we're also going to be creating an outline for this work, and so that template that I'm going to give you will kind of set up your MLA format so that you can see it and know what it looks like. If you have any questions about this assignment, you can always email me.